Hi. What you're about to see is very troubling. In the last year, several alarming patterns have begun to emerge around the world that reveal that the seals of Revelation, better known as the four horsemen of the apocalypse, are just beginning to be fulfilled. In this video, you're going to see news clips from every corner of the globe that show events that are an exact fulfillment of what was described in the Bible almost 2,000 years ago. And please don't misunderstand, the point of this video is not to date set or cry wolf, but to simply show you how to understand prophecy for yourself so that no one can mislead you. You will be able to know what signs to look for so that when more prophecy begins to be fulfilled, you won't be caught off guard. Now there are other interpretations which seem to fit nicely or seem to have already been fulfilled, so I'm going to show you that the Bible makes it very clear that these interpretations could not be the true fulfillment, and that according to the Bible the horsemen will be fulfilled literally on a global scale, and most important to understand is they are the first warning sign that we are entering into the time of Revelation. This study will benefit Christians and scholars who are certain that this can't be true, but it will also be helpful for anyone who wants to understand how to interpret prophecy. So in order for you to understand the significance of the clips you're watching, I'm going to alternate between showing you what the Bible warns about, then showing you how it's being fulfilled right now. This format will make it easy for you to gain a solid understanding of Revelation. You won't need to be a master of theology or up on the latest conspiracy theories to understand Revelation, but will be able to recognize all the things Revelation warned about. Revelation has been written in such a way where all the warning signs will be loud and clear and will unfold right out in the open. And this is why I'm using mainstream media, to demonstrate that God is so powerful that He can give us a warning in such a way that no matter how hard Satan tries, His plan will be completely transparent to those of us who understand. And please take the time to follow this study carefully. You see, for 2,000 years, everyone from the disciples, the reformers, and then theologians around the world today have been waiting to understand the mysteries of this prophecy. And finally now, at long last, the mystery of the horsemen have finally been solved. And when you see how they are being fulfilled, you will understand why they could never be understood until now, as they are being fulfilled in a way that no one could have possibly expected. Now before I begin, I want to warn you that there have been three main ways to intentionally or accidentally silence the book of Revelation, and if you're a believer in any of these, you need to reconsider. The first one, the pre-tribulation rapture theory, which teaches that God will rapture everyone away before most of Revelation is fulfilled, has caused Christians to see no need to study Revelation as they believe none of it has any bearing on their lives. The second, which is a mainly Catholic view, teaches that all of Revelation was fulfilled before 300 AD, which has resulted in Revelation only being studied as a hobby. And the third one is by interpreting Revelation as overly symbolic. This method, whether applied in the past or future, often results in the inability to pinpoint Revelation to anything specific. So for those who are having a hard time accepting that the seals could be fulfilled now and in a literal way, I'm going to show you how the Bible itself makes it clear that this is how they will be fulfilled. First, we're going to examine the curses that the horsemen bring, and then show you why we can be absolutely certain they are literal. When you look at the black, red, and pale horse, you will notice that the red horse takes peace from the earth, the black horse causes the price of food to go up, and the pale or sickly horse brings plague, and death or the grave follows with him. So, are the curses the horsemen bring symbolic or literal? Fortunately, the Bible answers this important question in three different ways. The first answer is seen in verse 8. And power was given to them, or the four horsemen, over 1/4 of the earth, to kill with the sword, hunger, and plague. Here we see the first answer to this question. This reveals that although the horsemen are symbolic, the curses they bring are literal, as in the scales and the price of food is not mysteriously symbolic of something else, but represents literal famine. This same sentence also helps to clarify when the seals will be fulfilled by showing how widespread their effects will be. Notice they had power over 1/4 of the earth. However, notice that it does not say 1/4 of mankind, but says 1/4 of the earth, which is translated dirt, which means 1/4 of the earth's geography. This distinction is very important, otherwise you might conclude that they kill 1/4 of mankind, which they do not. But they do cause death to occur over 1/4 of the earth. Although it is a relief to know that 1/4 of mankind won't die from these curses, it is concerning when you consider that 90% of the world's population is crammed into 1/4 of the world's geography. So although this doesn't mean billions will die, it does warn that most of the world could be affected to some degree by these curses. And now you can see why this prophecy could not have been fulfilled in Jerusalem 1900 years ago, as a tiny little region of Israel in no ways measures up to 1/4 of the world's geography. The second answer to this question on whether the curses are literal or symbolic can be found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke in what is called the beginning of sorrows. These same events are described again, but in this case are referred to as literal. Wars, rumors of wars, famine, pestilence, and here earthquakes are described as well. So why would one set of war, famine, plagues be symbolic and the other literal? Eventually what I want to show you is that these different passages are describing the same events but revealing different aspects of these events. And the third reason we can be certain that the curses of the horsemen are literal is that the events of famine, pestilence, and war are mentioned as occurring several times throughout the Bible, and in each of these cases they were literal events. This is found when studying into a mysterious-sounding phrase that appears throughout the Bible, abomination of desolation. This phrase is better translated, idolatry that leads to desolation. This was not just a one-time event, but was a name given to represent when people would knowingly reject God and turn to worshipping something else. Most commonly it was used in reference to when God's people would knowingly choose to worship or trust something else rather than God. This false worship would include relying on money, armies, and of course idols or the ways of the nations around them. But most important to understand is that they had to knowingly reject God, which meant God would have to honor their choice, but would also have to allow them to experience the consequences of their own actions. This is why it was usually Israel who was guilty of the abomination, and rarely the nations around Israel, because when Israel turned to idols they knew better, and because they knew better, God could no longer wink at their ignorance. Now, what was the desolation that would result from this idolatry? Famine, pestilence, and war. Notice in these verses over and over the desolation is always the same. Now obviously the famine, pestilence, and sword were not symbolic in these cases, nor are they symbolic in the beginning of sorrows. So then why would we conclude that the curses of the horsemen bring a symbolic form of famine, plague, and sword, especially when the passage itself clarifies that they are literal? As I mentioned, over-symbolizing Revelation is just one of the many ways of silencing the specific warning it is trying to give. This very principle of the abomination of desolation does not only help us understand that the curses are literal, but it is a reoccurring theme behind the whole book of Revelation, and behind everything that you're about to see. The book of Revelation warns that we must not worship or be part of something called the harlot. The harlot represents false religion. Now what is the harlot or false religion full of? Abominations. And what happens to this harlot full of abominations? In 1 hour she was made desolate. When the whole world completely rejects God who created the world and everything in it, and God steps back and allows mankind to do as they please, while at the same time ceases his merciful protection, this leads to quick self-destruction. So basically the whole punchline of Revelation is, don't worship the image or idol of the beast. Today you hear a lot of fascination over the mark of the beast, but when you read the verse carefully you see that you must worship the image of the beast to get the mark. In other words, you can't just take the mark by accident, you have to worship the image. The image represents the false worship aspect, while the mark represents what you get when you worship the image. This technical oversight has led to a lot of unnecessary confusion and debate. Now remember the key point here, that in order to be guilty of idolatry that leads to desolation, you must knowingly reject God. This means you can't worship the image by accident. During this time you will have the opportunity to know how to worship God, then make your choice. And when people knowingly reject God, he can no longer wink at their ignorance and turns them over to the consequences of their own choice. This then brings a desolation. So will the whole world have an opportunity to know the truth and choose God rather than the harlot or the image of the beast? Revelation 14:6 indicates that during this time the true gospel will go out to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. This means that before the whole world can make this choice between God and idolatry, each and every person will have this fair opportunity to hear truth and make their own choice. Do you see how this theme is what the book of Revelation is about in a nutshell? A global choice to either worship or reject God as our Creator. And since God is the Creator and therefore understands our world a little better than we do, this rejection of God's guidance will result in famine, plague, and war. But this time, because the rejection is global, the desolation will also be global. Now we're done with the study section and ready to lead into the clips that reveal just how prophecy is being fulfilled.